I think that, this whole thing about, Zoom overtaking or homeschooling and Zoom overtaking the in-class experience is baloney, okay? I saw my child here doing that, for a good amount of time. And she goes to my daughter goes to she's going into, first grade or kindergarten. And, and I saw my son who's like, can't even like, attention span is like 5 minutes, maybe at most on a Zoom, right? And there's no replacing the social interactions with friends, right? There's no replacing the teacher, the mentorship and the teacher interaction. I mean, and what you learn in the classroom and physically being there, there's no way you can get that experience from the Zoom, right? And the just like you said, like the tactileness of it, of touching things, of sitting there and someone actually holding your hand and teaching you, or being in front of a blackboard, or, it's not replaceable, right? So I think the long-term prospects for schooling in general is very good, right? And I think also as if I were your investor and you said to me, I want to buy the real estate and I want to do the school, I would say, hell yeah, because, I was thinking worst case scenarios. What happens if your school goes bust? At least I have some real assets that are worth something that I can recoup some of my losses, right? Yeah. And so I'm being like, I have every confidence that you'll do really well, but again, I'm thinking worst case scenario, right? Like if, things happen like that.
I didn't mention that my schools are state funded.
Okay. So, well, then the likelihood of that happening is very low, but it could happen, right? So you never rule anything out, right? So in my mind, I like that, and I actually think that in many cases it might be that the underlying real estate might be worth more than the school itself at some point, especially if you buy it in like up and coming gentrifying areas, right? Yeah. That real estate. And then also, like if you have a 10-year lease, right? Or whatever, in 10 years from now, your rent is going to go up tremendously. And what if you can't afford to stay there? Now you got to go and leave and find somewhere else. And what if you can't find a location in that area, and you just spent 10 years building a business that you have to give up, essentially.
Correct. So that's really interesting because my number one challenge, the kids are amazing. The Department of Ed's awesome. My number one challenge is real estate. Yeah. So it's interesting that you say, the pricing goes up for sure, right? Like I look at this and I'm like, we're only putting right now schools in challenging areas. Yes. Long term, there's 3 models. There's the alternative ed for, more low income challenged students. Then there's like the millionaires model that I get to intermix a little bit, obviously, because I want to be able to make sure the millionaires that their moms and dads own businesses, that they're going to hire these kids and these kids can become managers or partners long term. And then there's the billionaires model that will be super high end, like where my apartment is or your house on the beach, right? Like it's going to be super beautiful and they'll get to live somewhere, they'll get to work, but it's a 4-year minimum internship to run a business. Sure. So for 4 years, they learn every aspect of impacting and building schools, international trips, going to see the Dalai Lama with me, whatever those things are. They get the most amazing outside of the box experience, but it's $250,000 a year.
Yeah, well, listen, I think especially since you're doing it in these challenging areas, those challenging areas are the ones that in 10 years from now, you're going to see super appreciation. And because the fact of the matter is that, our society is developing and, with technology and, all the resources available to people and, more and more people moving to Florida also in general, those areas are not going to be that challenging for very long. And they're going to eventually, especially with people like you coming in and educating and doing all these great things, and also with opportunity zones. A lot of real estate developers are looking at these challenging areas and buying real estate because they fall under opportunity zone status, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but this is actually something important for you to know. You know, your school is technically a business, right? And then after 10 years, if you do something in an opportunity zone and then you end up selling it, you don't pay capital gains on it, which is a tremendous, I mean, a huge incentive for people to invest in these areas, right? So you won't be alone. You won't be alone doing that, right? And that's, you know, all these kind of factors coming together will bring up all these neighborhoods, and you're gonna look in retrospect and be like, that was the right move, was to buy the real estate.
Yeah, it's because I want to eliminate my challenge. I want to eliminate dealing with somebody who doesn't want to fix an AC, or somebody that, you know, whatever those little things are. It's like, just, it's in the contract, fix the AC, you know.
What's interesting also about the opportunity zone status is that when you do eventually sell your business or your real estate, you don't need to pay capital gain on either of those things. If it's, what do you call it? So you get a double whammy there, right? Because your business is located in an opportunity zone and you start it, that qualifies. And so does the real estate on top when you make the improvements. Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. Yes.
So I gotta take you out to lunch and pick your brain on that for sure.
Yeah, no, I have an expert that I've been dealing with who I learned all this from. This is not like me somehow being smarter than anyone else. I have like people that I've worked with and paid a lot of money to learn all this stuff from. So yes, there's a lot of stuff that is not obvious, right? Like that, but I think that you're on the right track there for sure.
I love it. I want to hit two more things, and I know we got a few more minutes. Honors and awards. NYU Founder Award, huge. Barry M. Goldwater Scholar, huge. Phi Beta Kappa, huge. Like, you know, being a part of what you're doing. You know, and then your publications, like 12 publications. That's a lot.
Honestly, those those were early in my academic career. I actually was really into. I had a really kind of different schooling. You know, I didn't really do well in school, in middle school or in high school, until maybe like 11th grade, when my counselor basically told me, dude, you know, like, you should be applying to community college, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? I was like, I want to go to like these great colleges. And she's like, look at your grades. You're not getting into any of these colleges, right? And it was like an instant wake up call for me, right? It was actually like a really big blow to my ego, right? Because I always kind of thought of myself as being intelligent, but then when someone basically showed me like black and white, you know, it was like a punch in the gut, right? And I'm like, shit, I gotta really get my act together. And I'm like, I need to study for my SATs. I need to. So this is like end of 10th grade, 11th grade kind of thing. And, you know, I really started to buckle down and study at that time. And, you know, and I kind of, again, I took that work ethic from my parents and I put that into my academics. And, you know, I ended up doing, you know, well on my SATs and good enough to getting into to NYU at that time, right? So I went from like getting B's and C, like low B's and C's, to straight A's, essentially, by working really hard, right? And so, you know, when I got to college, I really needed to step up my game because this is no longer high school. And, there are really intelligent people who went to things, especially in the pre-med course. There was hundreds of people in your chem class and your bio and organic chem and all these other things. And, you had to work twice as hard. And I took academics seriously like I would take business, right? And so I really thought that I might go into academia. I thought maybe I would go into research or that kind of thing. And, my whole life became consumed around academia. And that's where the publications came into play. And that's where those, I didn't ask for those scholars, when you do really well and you do great things, you get noticed, right? And that's really what happened to me. And I was are you sure this is for me? Because I'm not even thinking about this. All I'm thinking about is how do I pass my next chem exam, right? So I think, a lot of that kind of stuff came out of just really trying to, do well at what I was doing at that time. Not really thinking of oh, this is my name is going to get published, or I didn't really I didn't even really have that understanding of that concept when that happened. I was really just kind of doing my work, and that was it. So that's where all those things come from. Although now the last kind of year I've been writing a lot more, especially during COVID, because there was just not a lot of stuff that we could do. So I've stepped up my writing game. I started my own blog. I've been writing about things that are important to me and I think that other people are really interested in, like opportunity zones. I wrote a whole blog on opportunity zones. I wrote a whole blog on cross-segregation studies, which is something that you might want to do when you buy your real estate, and how the CARES Act helps. And I even write about, stuff that, my personal stuff, like how I teach my daughter coding, and a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, the tactile experience, the video experience, getting on the iPad, having an actual robot that you can touch, and all these different things of teaching her how to code and how that's really affected her and her schoolwork, to why I became vegan. There's a lot, I write about a lot of different stuff on my blog. So, and I try and keep it interesting. So.
I love it, bro. Let's finish off today with, I asked you in the beginning before we were on the podcast about parenting advice. And I told you I was having a baby in November and super excited, amazing woman in my life. Give me some advice. Could you repeat that a little bit about, going to the beach and spending quality time and putting it in your schedule so you make sure you really, commit to and follow through? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I always kind of had this thing in my mind that, if I ever get to a level of success for myself, that I would do the things that I said I would do, right? Like a lot of people work hard, right? To get to a point where they can spend a lot of time with their family or do the hobby that they want to do, or, I don't know, go work out or do these other things that they have on their to-do list, right? And they're not like their real to-do list, they're like imaginary to-do list, right? So, I always said to myself, if I have the means to be able to spend a lot of time with my family and my kids, that I would prioritize that over other things, right? And one of the main reasons why I haven't started a new startup, which is something that I've been kind of itching to do in the tech field, is mainly that, right? I know if I start a new tech company, I can't spend time with my kids. It's I can't do both. It's very hard to do that, right? Or to do that successfully, let's just say, right? So, I'm still very busy, and what I do is I look at my calendar and I see where I can spend at least an hour or two with my kids during the day, right? Not 7 o'clock at night at dinner, right? And not for like 15 minutes before they go to school, but like an hour or two chunk where I can spend, quality time putting the phone away, going to the